Palate to Palate with Robert St. John and Wyatt Waters is made possible by a generous contribution from the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation. Additional funding is provided by this and other public television stations and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Nothing can hurt me here. Okay. That's normal. That's supposed to be happening. He said suspiciously. Whoa, Nellis. All right. All right. You ain't gonna tell me but once.
What a great time on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We covered one end to the other. Wyatt's doing a painting at Stennis Space Center. We're going out on a shrimp boat where we haul in a massive load of shrimp. I'm gonna cook those shrimp up, and then we're gonna hit museums all along the coast. This episode is rated R. Me hearty. One of the most diverse parts of Mississippi is the Gulf Coast. From the people to the seafood industry, you know, the landscape, and your paintings that come from the Gulf Coast are some of my favorites.
Well, they're some of my favorites to paint because it's really, all the things you mentioned, the diversity gives you so many different ranges of subject matter, and the landscape's always changing. The weather comes, the weather goes, sunlight, clouds, water, shrimp boats, all that makes for good painting.
It's very unique, and here's the thing, one of the best kept secrets on all of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and maybe Mississippi as a whole, is Stennis Space Center.
I'm going to the Stennis Space Center. You can't say that fast 3 times without messing it up. Stennis Space Center. And paint some rockets down there.
You know, we didn't want to do the stereotypical things always. And I think that's where Stennis Space Center came in. And we kind of just were moving in a fluid manner that day and got on the phone and made some calls.
I say, are you the guy that went to Italy for a while?
Yeah, we're both, we both went to Italy and we did a book.
So my wife is in love with you guys.
Oh, well, we like her. You know, there's some top secret stuff obviously going on there because you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get in. But since Katrina, they've moved that visitor center out onto the interstate. And that's a really cool place. Hey, St. Louis, we have a problem.
The space program was a huge deal to me when I was growing up. Teachers would bring televisions to school and would watch launches. I did get to do a painting of the Saturn rocket, which is the largest rocket that America's ever made to date.
My mechanic would say it's warm with a capital H.
How's it going?
It's going.
Was that possibly the most dangerous painting you've ever
It wasn't the rocket.
tried?
It was the alligator. There was an alligator, and he told us there might be an alligator out there, and there was a little water area to the side. And the cameraman told me, said, "Oh, look over here." And there was this V coming toward me, and it got close and kind of stopped. He wasn't going underwater, but there was an alligator out there.
It was a real live alligator. I mean, it was there. And has that ever happened before? Have you ever
Well, yeah,
painted
but
a painting with an
usually just
alligator that close by?
I don't know. They usually just go down. This one was coming toward me. I had never had that happen.
So you had one eye on the painting, one eye on the alligator.
Yeah, I was kind of like that.
That's good. I like that. You launched rockets.
Yes, I did. We launched all the time. I don't know how many rockets we built and launched.
I had a potato gun. I did.
But our rockets were, you know, they were just tiny little things like that. Nothing like the scale of the Saturn. I mean, that's really what impressed me about being there. That thing was so big. And that's really what the painting was about to me, showing the scale of how mammoth and powerful this thing was.
In 1969, when we landed on the moon, I was with my grandfather and my brother. We were in Yankee Stadium in New York, watching a doubleheader between the Yankees and the Senators, and they announced over the loudspeaker that we had just landed on the moon. They played the national anthem. Everybody stood up. It was just this very cool moment. And later that night, we watched the moonwalk on my grandparents' TV right there on the Upper East Side, and my mom took pictures of the TV screen, which we still have. So while you were outside sweating and toiling over the painting, I was inside with our new friend John Wilson.
People bring us things that they think are important, and this lady contacted us the other day and had this poster from the Welcome Home Parade for Mr. Hayes, the Biloxi hero, welcome home after the Apollo 13.
Oh, wow.
And she found it in her parents' garage after Katrina. This is the parts and pieces of a glove that would have been worn on the moon. You can see who it was being made for.
Hayes.
So this would probably have been the glove he would have used on that booster.
On the one outside that Wyatt's
I mean,
painting
he would have flown on
right
that
now.
booster and had this glove on board.
The one that Wyatt's painting out there is the bottom third, the red.
It's the red. That booster, just that red section, at liftoff, fully fueled, weighed more than the entire space shuttle system weighed later.
And the computer that they used in '69 when they went to the moon had less information and capability than this phone, right? Is that correct?
Probably less than my Casio watch.
We watched it on TV of them walking on the moon. It was the most amazing thing.
I've never felt so patriotic and so proud to be an American. But it was a triumph for mankind too. We'd broken, as they say, the surly bonds of this earth and, you know, made our ways into the heavens. All right.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. You want to go check on Wyatt,
Sure.
see what's happening out there? Let's do it.
Just about there.
So I left the cool of the air conditioning and headed outside. And dude, that painting you did, the scale of that rocket.
It was that little bitty person compared to that huge rocket that you've seen a million times, but when you see it in the flesh, it just, I had a blast doing it.
Here's the Gulf Coast, and you've done a lot of beach, you've done a lot of shrimp boats, you've done a lot of those things, but to choose that rocket to represent the coast, very cool.
Houston, we have a painting.
We really spent almost all day at Stennis Space Center. The thing to do is call it a day and then get up early in the morning and go shrimping.
Those shrimpers don't get up at 10.
Nope. We're not buying Dramamine.
Oh no, we're not buying Dramamine. We're only buying the generic version of Dramamine.
We're on boats all the time. So if you want to go out on a shrimp boat, the best thing to do is call your seafood supplier. I called Todd Rossetti, and he hooked us up with the guy on the coast for shrimping. And that's Captain Baker and his son Junior. We got on that boat and we went shrimping, sure enough.
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
So when I was a kid, we came down here. My grandfather took me to Beresev's. I had my first raw oyster at Beresev's, which was right there between Beau Rivage and Hard Rock. And they had the pier restaurant. Down the beach a little bit was Sun and Sand. That's the old coast, the old line coast restaurants. There's really only a couple of restaurants left. Mary Mahoney's is the last of the kind of the old line Gulf Coast seafood restaurants, which I love.
We went for a 3-hour tour. I painted the lighthouse a few times, but I've never seen it from the water. Everything looks different when you change your vantage point. So we're going out there, we're passing the lighthouse, and all of a sudden we see this shrimp boat coming back.
The only boat out there besides us was another shrimp boat. The problem was it was coming back.
Leaving all that bounty of shrimp for us.
They told us it was going to be a bad day for shrimping. I think we both had a positive mental attitude and we thought, no, we're going to prove them wrong and we're going to have a great day shrimping.
Let's see what we get.
The skies were a little ominous. You know, a little squall action happening out there to the south. You know, we just didn't know if any minute that storm was going to come in.
Is that a water spout over there? If you don't know much about shrimping, which we don't, they put a test net out, and it's there to give you an indication of what the big net's going to be.
The indications were not good. Despite all of the odds being against us, the storm was out there. There were no boats out there. People told us we weren't going to get any shrimp.
We were determined.
We were determined. We were holding out. The net was out there. I had a good feeling. I thought, you know what, we're going to prove them wrong. And they started pulling that net in and pulling the net in, and I thought, here we go, man. This is it. It's going to be loaded with shrimp, and they pulled it in. I think we were both fired up. It was our first drag, big load of shrimp, possibly a new career for both of us in the shrimping business. This was our moment.
And then we picked it up.
It wasn't much of a haul.
Had a lot of fun.
I think all told, once we sorted through everything, I think we had 24 shrimp. 24 shrimp, not 24 pounds of shrimp, certainly not 600 pounds of shrimp, which is what they typically bring in a day, 600 pounds, 24 shrimp.
That was a good serving.
Yeah.
We caught all these little bitty trash fish, and you know, most fun I had was throwing all those, feeding all the seagulls.
Oh, good shot. Hey, Jonathan.
Nobody's gonna get that.
I know, this is a period piece.
We didn't haul him many shrimp, but the cool thing about it is we met Captain Baker, a cool guy, and Junior, his son. We pulled in, we counted 24 shrimp today. Not your typical haul.
Should have been the try net.
Yeah.
Can't you doctor that film up a little?
Yeah, we'll put some stock footage in there and make it look like it. How'd we do? Would you hire us as deckhands?
Definitely.
Oh, he's being nice. He's being nice. Most deckhands probably don't take Dramamine before they get on the shrimp boat. And the thing about it, he grew up on Deer Island. There were 4 houses on Deer Island. 3 of them were from his family, and they rowed a boat to school in the morning and back at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I think he was the 3rd or 4th generation to live on that island. 3rd generation shrimper, and still has, what, an 86-year-old
Yes, he does.
boat in his family.
And how many people can, how many people can say they grew up on Deer Island?
Yeah. About as many shrimp as we caught. So we came in from shrimping early, had a little breakfast, and while we were eating breakfast, it started to rain. So what do you do if it's raining on the coast? And the cool thing about being on the coast is they have these 3 very unique, very cool museums. We're starting out at one of our favorites, and that's Walter Anderson Museum. Show us the little room. We want to know.
The Walter Anderson Museum, to me, is just a real gem from Mississippi. It tells the story of Walter Anderson's life. It's not just the artwork. They tell about his life and the ways he made art. In fact, there's that little bitty room that they brought from the family's property by the water to the museum and secured it to that. And really, it survives only because it was moved to that museum.
She found this room, and she said that all over the floor were the watercolors, drawings, logs from his time at Horn Island.
Museum is awesome, and I love it. But I also love that community room.
This is just wonderful. It really is. That's beautiful, beautiful room. They had to pay him something for doing that mural, so they paid him $1. I'm not sure what the inflation value of that is today, but it was $1.
Didn't he tie himself to a tree on Horn Island like during a hurricane?
Yes, he did. That actually was Cat Island, which he didn't go to as often, but he did survive a week out there, I believe, tied to a tree, just waiting out the storm. So he was not deterred. He was going to get up to the island and create and do his thing no matter what.
But he would row to Horn Island, right?
Yes, he would row to Horn regularly.
And that's the boat that's in the
boat in
main
the museum is the boat that he used.
But the museum is more than just a home for those paintings. It really tells the story of his life, and that gives you the information of why he did what he did.
You remember we did an event in that community room, and where I cooked and you painted, our kind of typical deal. But the next time they asked us to do that, someone learned that you can't cook in there anymore, which is the right thing to do because, you know, I talked to someone who had dances there in high school and they would tape stuff on the walls in there and just, you know, it wasn't taken care of for a long time. And now I think they really appreciate what they have.
Sure, they should. It's a great asset to the coast and really the state.
Let me clue you into a secret about the Walter Anderson Museum. Only when it's raining do these sayings of Walter Anderson's appear. So if it's raining and you're at the museum, make sure to take a walk down the sidewalk outside.
He was an unusual fellow and a little off center, and it's common knowledge. He spent some time at a state hospital.
Typical Mississippi artist stuff. You know, there's that famous quote from Designing Women where they talk about the difference between the North and the South. And in the North, you put your crazy uncle in an asylum, and in the South, we put him on the front porch. And we celebrate that, and I love that. And that's kind of like, you know, certainly George Orr.
Yes, he was. He used it to his advantage, in fact.
Huge fans.
I'm huge.
Oh, well, obviously a woman with good taste.
George Orr took what is usually considered a functional kind of craft and really elevated it to a sculptural art form with his ceramics. But what was really great is there was a Picayune artist that also did something unusual. She was there, and her paintings were not done with a brush and paint. They were done with embroidery thread and a needle.
Beautiful stuff.
You would
I mean,
think.
true craftsmanship and artistry. Ruth Miller, who lives in Picayune now, it's just amazing.
And you think this is a beautiful oil painting, and you get closer and you see that it's thread.
Wyatt's in stitches.
This is amazing. I thought it was painting, man.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, even when I got pretty close to it, I thought, that paint's fuzzy, you know. I didn't think it was thread.
There's art on the coast, but there's a big seafood industry there, and the water has so much to do with what goes on in that Mississippi Sound, the Barrier Islands, and the seafood industry. And the cool thing about that seafood museum is that is really the coast encapsulated in one building, and it goes through the storms, it goes through the seafood industry, different sailing vessels and boating vessels. All the history of the coast is in that one building, and I had never been there before. I mean, it was just a year or so ago when I went for the first time. I love that place.
There was a shrimp peeling machine that was invented by a guy when he was 17 years old. It was like the Eli Whitney of the Gulf Coast.
So there was the history of the shrimping industry from Biloxi, which is really, at one time, Biloxi was the shrimp capital of the world. And we were surrounded by all those pictures, and I couldn't help but think of our catch from earlier that day. And they weren't asking us for any shrimping advice in the museum.
You know, the photographs make their shrimp look a lot bigger.
The plan was to take our big shrimp haul back to Hattiesburg and just go to my kitchen and prepare baked shrimp and squash. But we didn't have much of a haul. I don't even know what happened to those
You
shrimp.
don't plan so much.
So we went to the restaurant and got some shrimp from the restaurant. And
very good.
today I'm going to show you how to make baked shrimp and squash. It's 2 skillets at first.
You're cooking
The perfect part of this is our friend Enzo's olive oil. Usually don't want to cook with extra virgin olive oil, but in honor of our friend Enzo, we're going to cook the squash here, we're going to cook the shrimp here. Then we're going to drain them, then we're going to combine them. I call it Piney Woods cuisine, and this would be the perfect example of this. This is regular, just basic yellow crookneck squash. So this is going to release some liquid. Go for it.
I'm not going to do that.
You got it. It's all in the wrist.
Okay, it's all in the wrist. It's all in the wrist.
Yeah.
It's all in the wrist. Look at that.
Put my shrimp in. Put it in away from you so it doesn't splatter towards you.
Again, it's all in the wrist.
All right, so what I do with shrimp is I use Old Bay seasoning with shrimp. I think there's like some celery salt in it. But
I love that stuff.
yeah, it works well with shrimp. Let's move that squash around. There's a spatula over there if you want to just turn it.
I don't want to be cleaning the floor.
So the shrimp are going to cook before the squash. I'm going to add some onion in there, add some red bell pepper, and some green bell pepper. There's no celery, so it's not really a trinity. We're going to cook that. I'm not going to add the garlic yet. So we're going to cook these shrimp. Just moving those peppers around. Doing good over there. We just need to keep cooking.
I'm keeping it going, man. Moving it around, shaking it up, not shaking it like you.
The beauty of this thing is what you want to do is do this a day ahead. You got company coming, cook this a day ahead, and the key to cooking, especially cooking like this, is to handle and get your mise en place done. Mise en place is everything in its place.
I love that word.
Measure everything out, and that way when you're cooking, you can just kind of take your time, you can relax, and you're not scrambling around going, oh, I gotta get the spice here, and I gotta get this bowl here, and I'm running and scrambling.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. All right, these shrimp are almost done. You can tell when they start curling up a little bit like that.
Smells good.
All right. Add your Creole seasoning in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Just
portion
go
it
ahead.
around.
Just dump it in. All right, let's
Here we
do
go.
salt and pepper.
How much salt?
All of it. There you go.
Pepper.
Pepper. All right. Green onions in.
All of it?
And I'm gonna go ahead and add this garlic. Yeah. Go ahead and put your garlic in. All of it. This is key. I'm gonna take my first colander and I'm gonna drain that shrimp. I don't want that excess moisture. So I'm gonna take those shrimp, add them to the bowl. You see how it's getting soft and it's breaking up a little bit? Yeah. Same deal. Now what we wanna do, without really disfiguring the squash, we wanna just gently press to get some excess moisture out of there. This is the really cool part. So this is hot, and we wanna work with it while it's hot, because we're gonna make our own sauce. This is hot sauce, Old Bay seasoning. Got some green onions. All right, we're gonna stir that around. This is sour cream. All right, hold on, I'm gonna mix the sour cream up in there. Go ahead and dump the cheddar in.
Okay.
Let's see, that's gonna melt. Let's go ahead and add the Parmesan cheese. Take about 4 or 5 at a time and just crush them and crumble them up with your hands. No big pieces. You see how that cheese melted in there?
Oh, wow.
So it made a sauce. Remember what all we had a minute ago were shrimp and squash. All right, so look.
Superman crushing a wall.
Take the parsley and the rest of that Parmesan cheese there, dump it in all the way. Use this spoon, mix it up. I'm gonna pour this into the bowl. Out of the bowl into the Pyrex casserole dish. So since this is already cooked and it's hot, I'm gonna go ahead and just put the crumbs on now. Now, here's my trick. You put a layer on like that just over the top, and that adds a little crunchiness. But if there is excess moisture in there, it's gonna go to the corners.
Okay.
And so I kind of load up the corners, and that soaks up any excess moisture around the edges, and actually those rich crumbs taste really good. All right. 350, I have it on convection. 15, 20 minutes, we're gonna be good to eat. Look at it. Bubbling. Ooh. Cheers.
Excellent. The crackers are really.
That's it. You know what? That's what makes this dish the expertly crumbled rich crackers that you did. Well
I
done.
say, boy, I
Well
have
done.
some help with it.
2017 is going to be known for rain. And by mid-June, when all that fresh water started coming out into the Mississippi Sound, it affected the shrimp haul. It affected our shrimp haul. The other thing about it affected you going down to the Gulf Coast, the rain did. And
I was on hold for a couple of plus weeks because of the rain.
You made do.
But you know, when life gives you rain, you go to another museum. And so I went to the Natural Science Museum, and what do they have there but a huge coastal seaquarium? So I'm able to really do this double truck 2-page painting of the coast inside. So if people wonder how I worked on location on an underwater painting, that's how I did it.
You know, ultimately, the coast holds a special place in my heart. My dad died when I was 6. I had an older brother who was 10 at the time. My mom knew she wasn't going to be able to play football with us. She wasn't going to be able to go hunting, but she figured she could learn how to fish. And she bought a small fish camp up the Pascagoula River, and we spent our summers on the Gulf Coast. The first oyster I ever ate was on the Gulf Coast. The first time I ever ate crab meat was on the Gulf Coast. It has such special memories for me. It was great going down there with my best friend and hanging out and just reliving that. It's really a second home for me. And again, one of the most diverse parts of this state, and we are blessed to live not so far from there.
It's the vacation part of life, we always go to the coast. All life goes to the water. We just have to have it.
Watercolor, Wyatt Waters, Gulf Coast, shrimp. That's what it's about.
Says it all.
Many of the paintings seen on today's program are featured in the A Mississippi Palate cookbook. This beautiful volume also includes Mississippi heritage recipes. A Mississippi Palate cookbook. Palate to Palate with Robert St. John and Wyatt Waters is made possible by a generous contribution from the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation. Additional funding is provided by this and other public television stations and from viewers like you. Thank you.